I want to like to thank all of you for being here. And thank you for inviting me to teach this prayer, the aspiration of Mahamudra, of definitive meaning of the third Karmapa. I have been teaching this prayer now for about 5 or 6 years to students of Nundro, students who are doing Nundro, the students of Columbus KTC and elsewhere who are doing the Nundro practice. And part of the reason that I started doing that was because I discovered the wonderful commentary by Trungpa Rinpoche, so brief, so clear, so easy to understand, and so inspiring. And the prayer itself is very inspiring. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe you will have discovered this through reciting the prayer. And also, I was delighted that the book was available for free on the internet. So between those two things, I said, oh, this is something to do. Now, you may ask why I chose this particular prayer and why I chose to teach this. And part of it is because Mcarthur Rinpoche said that when a person is doing the Mahamudra Nundro practice, the preliminaries, he said that is a really good time to introduce the view of Mahamudra to students. And so that is what is primarily taught in Trungpa Rinpoche's commentary, is the view of Mahamudra. Now, he doesn't teach the practice per se, the practice of Mahamudra, which is okay because it is something that we will encounter later on in our training. But I wanted to introduce this because Khenpo Rinpoche said that it's the right time. And even if you are not currently doing the Mahamudra Nundro, if you have heard about it or had some exposure to the teachings of Mahamudra through the teachings of Trungpa Rinpoche, for example, the teachings of Mingyur Rinpoche, for example, the teachings of Situ Rinpoche, for example, or Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. If you've been introduced to the ideas of Mahamudra practice, it's great to learn this prayer so that it can inspire you to practice. So when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche began the Karma Thegsum Chöling centers back in the 1970s, he gave us a curriculum. He said, everyone starts with the shamatha practice, the quiet sitting meditation practice. And that helps to calm the mind and stabilize the mind so that students can begin to study the basics of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, and the basic ethics and morality of Buddhism and the basics of the teachings of the Buddha. And then he said, after a person has been doing shamatha practice for a while, it's fine to introduce them to the practice of Chenrezig, because he said some people, they are not as enthusiastic about shamatha meditation, but they really like the chanting. And they really like Om Mani Padme Hum, the compassion mantra, and they really like the idea of Chenrezig, So he said you can introduce that to them. And then he said, if a person is interested to continue after learning shamatha and Chenrezig, he said you can teach them mind training. And the mind training or lojong practice is where you learn bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, citta means mind, so the mind of awakening. So that's the next practice that he encouraged people to learn. First shamatha, then Chenrezig, then lojong or mind training. And he said, teaching people how to do the tonglen, sending and receiving, compassion meditation practice, helps them to train in the attitude of a bodhisattva. And he said this attitude of a bodhisattva is essential for anyone who is interested in studying Mahamudra. because he said if they go into Mahamudra practice without thoroughly internalizing the wish to be a benefit to others, he said even the great Mahamudra practice can turn into a problem for them, because they'll end up doing it for selfish motivation, maybe so that other people will think they're special, or that they will have status or some other thing like that. So he said bodhicitta motivation will help prevent those kinds of obstacles from arising in a person's Mahamudra practice. And so that's why the next practice is usually Tonglen, sending and receiving, as well as the practices of Lojong, which are taught in this book, The Great Path of Awakening. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche encouraged me to teach The Great Path of Awakening to any student who was interested in the Nundro practice, because he said if they do the 7-point mind training, which is what is taught in this book, he said their practice of Nundro and their practice of Mahamudra will go well. And he said, so please teach this. And he said, if you teach Jamgon Kongtrul's methods, he said, you can't make a mistake, which was really helpful for me, because when I first started teaching, I was really terrified of making mistakes in Dharma teaching because I was not a scholar. I'm still not a scholar, but I taught this book extensively for 20 years, and it really helped me a lot. And then in the 5 or 6 years that I've been teaching Trungpa Rinpoche's commentary on the Mahamudra prayer, I've learned a lot more. So these two books have really, really helped me understand Dharma a lot better. So that's a little bit of the reason behind wanting to teach this class on that particular book. The other reason is that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that as we recite aspiration prayers, he said those aspiration prayers gradually teach us from the inside out. And he said it's good to do these prayers in English, these aspiration prayers in English, so that we can internalize the teachings that are inside these aspiration prayers. And so this was the reasoning behind wanting to do this. Now, to go back to the previous topic of the practice curriculum, eventually people will be doing the Nundro practice, or they will be doing the practice of Mahamudra in some way, whether they study with Trungpa Rinpoche or Situ Rinpoche or Mingyur Rinpoche. People will be doing these practices. And when they do that, it helps them to have some background. So that's a little bit about how we train people under Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's direction. When people complete their Nundro practice, they finish all their 100,000 recitations of refuge and 100,000 recitations of Vajrasattva, 100,000 recitations of Mandala offering, and 100,000 recitations of Guru Yoga. The 16th Karmapa gave the Karmapakshi sadhana, Guru sadhana practice, as the next practice. And the Guru sadhana of Karmapakshi was written in the 17th century, but now I may be wrong about that. It might have been the 15th. I'm going to have to go back and read it again to remember my centuries. But it was written by a Nyingma treasure revealer named Mingyur Dorje, who now we know as Mingyur Rinpoche. Mm-hmm. So so this amazing text unifies the path of Mahamudra and Dzogchen in a single practice. And the 16th Karmapa said, for those people who were unable to do the 3-year retreat, doing the Guru sadhana of Karmapakshi would help them in their Mahamudra practice. It would help support their Mahamudra practice. And now that I've been teaching the Karmapakshi practice and the Mahamudra practices to some of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's students now in the last few years, they have all told me that these two practices help each other. The Mahamudra practice helps the Karmapa practice, and the Karmapa practice helps the Mahamudra practice. And this prayer, I've started teaching this prayer also to the Karmapa people, and they're really happy. So, so anyway, that's just a general outline of how and why I taught this prayer. And so with that, I will turn it over to you for your questions, comments, and so on. So thank you for listening. What do they say these days? Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
I had a question, Lama K.
Yes.
The Foundation of Aspiration, number 2. It mentions the 3 concepts.
Yeah.
And the Fourkayas. Can you please tell me again?
Sure.
What the 3 concepts and the Fourkayas are?
Sure. If we look at the, this is verse number 2, yes?
Yes.
Okay. The verse goes like this. I'm doing this for the recording. May all rivers, the accumulation of virtue, unpolluted by the 3 concepts, flowing from the snow mountains of pure intention and action of myself and all the infinite sentient beings, merge into the ocean, the Fourkayas of the victorious ones. So yeah, this prayer, I guess you could say the prayer is very densely written. It's like densely woven cloth. There's a lot in it. And so inside each verse, there's a lot of concepts. And inside each verse, there's a lot of familiar and not so familiar phrases. And so he uses a river analogy here because in Tibet, the rivers came from the snow mountains. And so he compares pure intention and action and the virtue born from pure intention and action, like the snow that gives birth to the rivers that come down the mountainside. And then those rivers then eventually merge into the ocean. And so his idea is that may all of this virtue come to fruition as the 4 kayas or the 4 bodies of the Buddha. So the 3 concepts, he's talking about virtue unpolluted by the 3 concepts. Okay, virtue that is unpolluted by the 3 concepts. And so these 3 concepts are the subject, the object, and the action. Subject, object, and action. Those are the 3 concepts.
Buddhism.
Yeah, the 3 concepts of subject, object, and action. So if you read Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, he says that if you do virtuous action that is free from thinking about, I am giving this thing to someone else, you know, like I am being generous, but I am being generous to this person, and so forth. You have a concept of yourself as doing something good. If you can let go of subject, object, and action, there is less of a samsaric stain on your generosity. And so he said, even if all you can do, and the Gampopa says, even if all you can do is think to yourself intellectually, no giver, no receiver, no object, no action. He said, even if you intellectually put your gift in that framework, it purifies it of clinging to the idea that I am doing this for you and I am getting merit because of this thing I'm doing for you. And so he's saying that if we do virtuous action, we should try to do virtuous action without clinging. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, now, Fourkayas. Okay. There are lots of ways that the Fourkayas are explained. And in this, I'm going to take a quick look here to see if he talks about it here. Nah, he doesn't really talk about it here. So we're going to have to go back to the jewel, not jewel ornament, but the Great Path of Awakening. In the footnotes to the Great Path of Awakening, Ken MacLeod gives a very good description of the Fourkayas in the book, in his commentary, or I'm sorry, his I guess you could call it his commentary, his footnotes. And in this, he explains the Fourkayas in footnote. Have to find out which one it is. It's coming. We're not there yet. Because, let's see, there it is. Footnote number 67. In the 2005 edition, it's on page 80. So I'm just going to read what Ken has written here as a way of explaining the Fourkayas. Buddhahood is described in terms of four kayas, which the word kaya literally means bodies, or four aspects of being. Now, I like the idea of, instead of calling it a body, he's calling it an aspect of being, you see. The first is Dharmakaya, or being as truth. It is like space without beginning or end. It's total simplicity, beyond any logical determination, and free of all limitations or obscurations. So in other words, it is the enlightened mind of the Buddha. The enlightened mind of the Buddha is sometimes called the Dharmakaya, okay? But the Dharmakaya is not inert. It doesn't just sit there being the Dharmakaya. It is dynamic and works for the benefit of beings. So that gives rise, the Dharmakaya through compassion gives rise to the two kayas that have form. So this is the second, is the Sambhogakaya, or being as full of qualities. Its domain is the pure realm of natural well-being. It arises in a variety of forms as the expression of compassion and communicates awakening as transcending awareness to high-level bodhisattvas. The way this has been explained to me by other lamas is that the Sambhogakaya is full of qualities. If you see pictures like this picture of white Tara that is displayed on the wall behind me, this picture of white Tara, she's dressed in silks and jewels and is wearing many jewels and gold, bracelets, armlets, anklets, a belt, and so on, and a crown. These stand for the qualities of Buddhahood, all the qualities of compassion, all the qualities of perfect compassion, perfect love, perfect wisdom are symbolized by the silks and jewels and so on. So this is the way that Buddhas are, the Dharmakaya is experienced by those who have accomplished pure karma, meaning that they have actually attained the first bodhisattva level. So we, so we as ordinary beings don't experience the awakened ones as Sambhogakaya. We see them, because we have impure karma, we see them as the Nirmanakaya, or the being as form. And so then that's why Ken is saying here that all these qualities are experienced by those of pure karma. So if we would see a Buddha, we would, as ordinary people, only see a human being, an ordinary human being. And so he says, the third is the Nirmanakaya, or being as expression. Its domain is the world of experience of sentient beings. And it reveals awakening in many different ways that inspire beings to seek freedom from ego-oriented existence. And so that means the Nirmanakaya, such as the Buddha Shakyamuni, was the supreme Nirmanakaya. But then we see lots of Nirmanakaya, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, His Holiness Karmapa, and so on. And the fourth body of the Buddha is Bhavavikaya, or being as it is. It is not so much a fourth kaya as it is a way of expressing the inseparability of the preceding three. Although these four aspects of being are realized in their entirety only when all lack of awareness and obscurations have been eliminated in our stream of being, they are present in all experience. In his commentary on the 7-point mind training, Kongtrul points out these aspects of experience which correspond to the four kayas. So Dharmakaya, the enlightened mind of the Buddha, expresses itself through compassion as the Sambhogakaya for beings of pure karma, and the Nirmanakaya for those of impure karma. And all three of these are inseparable, which is the fourth kaya. So this prayer then, this verse in the prayer is saying, may our virtue be purified of the three stains of clinging to subject, object, and action. And by being purified, may our practice ripen and mature into the experience of Buddhahood, which is, he's using the four kayas as code language to say Buddhahood. So instead, he's using it metaphorically. May all of this pure virtue, unsullied by the three aspects, merge into the ocean of Buddhahood. Does that help?
Yes, and I'm going to read it because I have the book, so I'm going to read it also.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it. You can read what I would do. You mean this book?
Yes.
What I would do is you can go to my YouTube channel and watch the classes, because I did classes on this a year ago or so. And you can watch each episode, and it goes through the meaning of the words, the English translation. So if that's helpful, got it. If not, just read it very carefully and write down all your questions, and then we can do interview on that.
Perfect. Thank you, Lama Kay.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Things you're curious about? Okay, no questions. Well, I'm sorry. I wish there's something I could do about that, but I can't change that. Yeah. So you can ask questions about anything then. You don't have to ask about the book. If you have questions about anything else, you can ask about those. I'm just happy to see everyone.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
When I don't know if you would call him a Buddha or what you would call him, but when one of these early teachers from India came to Tibet and passed on some of these teachings, like how did it happen that in India that's considered Hinduism, and for many other parts of the world it's called Buddhism? I just don't, I see their similarities, but I don't quite understand like what happened with that.
Mm-hmm. I can't say myself, I can't say myself all of the history of India.
There's a lot of history
coming. I'm sorry?
There's a lot of history. So I just,
Right.
like at least a little overview or something.
Yeah, I can tell you what I know about it. How about that?
Okay.
I can't give you a full, because I haven't really studied the history of whether or not Hindu teachings came to Tibet. My guess is they must have come to Tibet. but the Tibetans were very cautious, and they always wanted to know who taught the teaching that they were going to receive. That, they would always say to a person, who is your guru? And where did you learn this? And where did you receive this transmission? And so on.
So
So,
wise.
because they wanted to be sure it was pure and that it came from an enlightened being. So, so the main teachings that I've heard of going to Tibet were not Hindu teachings, but Buddhist teachings. But that doesn't mean the Hindu teachings didn't come to Tibet. That's why I'm saying we need a real historian to tell us this. But the Indian teachers who came, who went to Tibet very early, were people like, oh gosh, his name just Santarakshita or Dharmarakshita. And there was a great abbot of an Indian Buddhist monastery that came. Oh, his name is just missing in my mind. But he went and he tried to establish a Buddhist monastery in Tibet, but it didn't work out. And so as a result, the king of Tibet invited Guru Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, to come from Pakistan to Tibet to help with all of the sort of shamanic and demonic things that were happening, that were giving trouble to this abbot. And so finally, through the help of Guru Rinpoche, the great abbot, whose name I have forgotten, had created the great monasteries, one of the first great monasteries in Tibet. Then later, in the second spreading of Buddhism, which happened around the 10th century, Atisha, another great master from Indian Buddhism, came to Tibet and taught the Lojong teachings that later became the basis for these teachings on the bodhicitta. So you'll need to really talk to the scholars to tell you all of the history of Buddhism coming from India to Tibet. But
so it was considered
somewhere around the 10th century, Atisha came, and then after that, the Tibetans started going to India to receive the teachings there. And the example from our tradition is Marpa the translator, who made, I think, was it 3 or 4 trips to India to receive teachings from Indian gurus. And they were all Buddhist, not Hindu.
Okay, so maybe they were all Buddhist from the beginning, and I'm just confused about it.
It's possible, but I don't know for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, you're
Because
welcome.
I'm kind of interested, like, in how we're all so interconnected in many ways, and I guess what I've been learning is some information in regards to interreligious kind of dialogue. And I remember the Dalai Lama, when I heard him saying, it's important, instead of in your life, to be going around changing from one religion to another,
Mhm.
learn what you can. If it enhances your own practice, do that enhances your own practice, and so for me, it's like I mean, that was the whole thing with Buddhism. It's like it just opens up a whole world that I never had. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. You won't be the first person who has said this, but someone said to me, even just recently, when I read my first Buddhist book, I felt like I had come home. I felt like I was home. I was with people who understood me, and so you won't be the first person to say it, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome. Keep practicing.
Yes, thank you.
Now it looks like we have a comment. Hey, Charles, can you want to share this with us?
Sure. Greetings. I concur with everything you just said about the spread of Dharma into Tibet and the early teachers. One concept which may have lent towards the belief that Buddhism was part of Hinduism, which was known as the Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal truth, is that one of the incarnations of Vishnu, who is one of the three main triumvirants, three main deities in Hinduism, Shiva, the destroyer, Vishnu, the preserver, and Brahma, the creator. It was claimed that one of the incarnations of Vishnu was the Buddha.
Oh, I
So
see.
that in Hinduism, they claimed that, well, this is part of the eternal truth.
I see.
Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu. So
Oh,
that
that's interesting.
that was in response to the question, how did
Mhm.
Buddhism get considered to be Hinduism? But we all know that there were profound differences in the way the Dharma was taught and what the emphasis was,
Mhm.
particularly the concept of selflessness, as opposed
Oh,
to
Atma.
an Atma, a permanent self or soul. So,
Yeah,
and then,
that's right.
of course, the rejection of the caste system
Mhm.
in Buddhism. So there were profound differences, but
Mhm.
nonetheless, many like to still claim, oh, it's part of the teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
it's I understand that. Thank you for sharing that, because I had heard that that certain groups of Hindus had claimed the Buddha as one of the avatars of of the Hindu gods. But I remember the anecdote from the life of the Buddha, where after his enlightenment, somebody asked, which of the Hindu gods are you? And he said, none of them.
Yeah,
And
right.
none of them, I'm none
Yeah.
of them. And then they said, well, then are you an ordinary person? And he said, no, I'm an enlightened person. I'm an awakened person. So he put himself right
Yeah.
in between ordinary and divine. I mean, again, the middle way. Our Shakyamuni was
Beautiful.
an amazing teacher. So by the way, there's another book that's of interest. My memory for things is starting to degrade a bit. But I read recently, and I'm going to be teaching next spring on Tralek Rinpoche's book on karma. And he talks extensively about the differences in the Hindu idea of karma and the Buddhist idea of karma. So he gets a little bit into that in that book too. But it's not quite as detailed as what you're talking about here, but it's pretty cool. Okay, thanks. Other
Lama Kathy, what's the name of the book that you were thinking of?
okay. The book that I'm going to be teaching on, let's see if I can type it into chat. It's Karma. And then the name of the book was Karma. Yep. Oh, achoo. Yeah. It's called Karma, What It Is, What It Is Not. And why it matters. So karma, what it is not, and why it matters. And the teacher is Tralek Rinpoche, Traleg Rinpoche. And I'm thinking, I have just finished studying it with one of my Dharma friends, and I said, this is so good. I don't totally understand it, but I think other people should read this book and learn a little bit about it, if they want to learn something about karma, even though we may end up teaching each other. But it's going to be fun to read, I think. So there's a couple of books I'm looking at studying next year. And that's one of them anyway. Other things to talk about.
Lama Kathy,
Yes, sir.
I wanted to put into chat a link to your podcast on teacher-student relationship so everybody could have that.
Okay, Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I had some fun. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question about smoke offerings.
Sure.
If I don't have time to recite the prayer, is there any benefit to making the smoke offering in the morning or the evening, or is it really tied to the prayer that goes along with it?
I'll tell you what, I want to say something first about the podcast.
Yeah.
I really enjoy Krista Schwimmer, who lives in California, and she and her husband Michael do a podcast called The Sixth Sense Society, and it's about the occult and tarot cards and psychics and the whole thing. But they invite me on the show once a year or maybe twice a year. I don't remember. But I get the biggest kick out of being on the show because I love their questions. Their questions are just so good. And they wanted to talk about the teacher-student relationship. So I had some fun answering their questions. So anyway, so that's first things first. And I just did that like day before yesterday. It's always fun talking to them. And then, but then the second thing is on the smoke offering. There's a, let's see if I can find it quickly. The answer to your question is yes and no. You know, that's, you know, it's how it works. Mcarthur Rinpoche, when he was teaching on the 7-point mind training, you know, the 7-point mind training, he didn't teach exactly on the Great Path of Awakening, but he was teaching on a book by Trungpa Rinpoche about the 7-point mind training. And I apologize, I've forgotten the English translation of the title for that book. I think it was called something like The Heart of, yeah, is that it? Can you read that, Ani?
Sure, this is the one you're thinking about, Essential Mind Training by Trupten Jinpa.
It's not that one. It's but thank you.
There's another one. I have a BL, the 7-point Mind Training by B. Alan Wallace.
That's another good book, but no, it's not that one. The one I'm talking about was written by Trungpa Rinpoche.
I think.
And I think it's called Heart of the Dharma.
Yes, I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. Okay. Thank you. Hey, but you prompted me. You prompted me, so I figured it out. Thank you. Sometimes, you know, if I know what it's not, then sometimes I can remember what it is. So Khenpo Rinpoche was teaching on Heart of the Dharma. And he gave a teaching on the smoke offering. And this is something that he described kind of from his own childhood. He said in every Tibetan family that is multi-generational, living in the same house, everybody has a prayer responsibility. And he said in the prayer responsibility of the grandparents, every morning is to make a small fire or to place a little juniper incense on the family fire, and it goes up through the hole in the roof of the tent, and make a little prayer. And he said the prayer can be in your own words. And what the prayer can be is the prayer can be for the benefit of the family. It can be for the benefit of the neighborhood, but you're offering to what are called the 4 groups of guests. So what I did when I took the notes on this section and when I share the notes with people, I just say, well, you can light a stick of incense outdoors so that the smoke goes out, and you can make the prayer and imagine that smoke coming from that stick of incense is all of the wondrous things of the world. And you are offering all of the wondrous things of the world to 4 groups of guests. And I'm going to, I'll type them into chat right now. The first one is the enlightened beings. Enlightened beings. They're called the guests of veneration. And we imagine that the smoke becomes offerings to them. And then the second group is the Dharma protectors. And they're called the guests of quality. And the reason they're called guests of quality is because through their efforts to keep us on the Dharma path, our Buddha qualities slowly grow. And so we pray for them to help us tame our mental afflictions. And then the third group of guests is sentient beings. Sentient beings are called the guests of compassion. And we imagine that this incense smoke becomes everything they need. If they're hungry, it becomes food. If they have poverty, it becomes riches, and whatever it is that they need to help relieve their suffering in samsara. You see, that's why they're called the guests of compassion. And then finally, it's the karmic creditors who are called the guests of repayment. Because Rinpoche explained that all of the many, many millions of times we have lived, previous lives, we have caused harm to other beings. And those other beings feel that we owe them a debt. They don't even know why. He said, have you ever met someone who instantly disliked you, or who you instantly disliked and there's no real reason for it? He said, this could be a situation of karmic creditor. And so he said, so they're called the guests of repayment because you imagine the smoke coming from this incense stick as being whatever they want that you have. Here, take whatever I have, may all of my karmic debts to you be repaid. So you can think of these four groups of guests, or you can just say, may this be whatever is needed by the enlightened ones and the protectors and the sentient beings and the creditors. You can just say your own words. He said, you don't have to worry about saying anything fancy. So that's kind of what I do. I light the incense stick outdoors, and then I come into the room just inside, and I recite a prayer. I say a refuge prayer. I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, because Rinpoche said that's the best way to start any Buddhist practice, because you take refuge until enlightenment is reached in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then I said, now may this be what is needed by these four groups of guests. And I have them memorized, so I just recite that. To the enlightened beings, the guests of offering, so I think I did say that here, didn't I? Of guests of veneration and so forth. And so I just say my own version of that prayer. So I feel like it's important for us to say something, for us to place an intention on the smoke and to offer it. And then starting with refuge, making the offering and dedicating at the end. I think if you can have those three parts, refuge, the offering, and dedication, then even if you use your own words, it should be fine. So I hope that helps.
It does. It's great because it doesn't take much time to just have that intention for the four types of guests, and rather than an elaborate morning prayer.
Yeah, and because the elaborate morning prayer also uses a mantra, if I have time, I'll say Om Ahung, which is the offering mantra that's in the elaborate practice.
Okay.
And I'll just sit for a second or stand for a second and say Om Ahung, Om Ahung, Om Ahung, and then I'll imagine the smoke becomes everything they need. And then I dedicate the merit. And so it's the rudimentary practice. It's kind of rudimentary, but I think it because Rinpoche said it didn't have to be fancy.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
I'm going to take a quick look here. Yes, I do have a link. that I'm going to put into a chat. This is a link from my Dropbox where Rinpoche's teaching about this very simplified smoke offering. And people can look at that and read it and get this exact same thing, maybe with slightly different words, but you can copy that and paste it into a browser, a web browser, and that'll turn up that will show you the article about it. Because lots of people asked me last year when the pandemic began, they said, obviously the earth is unhappy. How can we make offerings, because, we have this terrible thing going on. And one of the things that occurred to me was that we could just do this little simple incense offering, and it helped a lot of people feel as though they were doing what they could to repay karmic debt and to calm sentient beings and all of that kind of thing. So thank you for asking.
Sure.
Should you use certain kinds of incense when you do that, or does
Well,
it matter?
they actually make a type of incense, and I'll put it in chat. It's called Sang, which is spelled S-A-N-G, Sang, but not everybody has that kind of incense. So Khenpo Rinpoche said to us when we were in 3-year retreat that for Sang practice, any incense will work. For the Sang smoke offering, any kind of incense will be fine.
Okay.
There is a special kind you can find online and so forth like that, but you don't have to have it. He said any incense. In fact, I use a Japanese incense that I just happen to have a bunch of. So
Okay, thank you.
there's a second smoke offering that is made for beings in the bardo, and it's called Sur, S-U-R. That takes a very special, you have to have a special kind of incense made just for that, because it has to have a little bit of what are called the 3 whites and the 3 sweets in it. And that's a whole nother thing. I can teach about that some other time. Yeah. And Charles is noting that you can get incenses at Namsay Bangso, the bookstore at KTD Monastery. And that's true. You can do that. They have a good selection. And any purchase you make there benefits the monastery.
What's the name of it again?
Yeah, and it's Namsay, and I'll spell that. It's N-A-M-S-E, Namsay. And then the second word is Bangso. That's B as in boy, A, N as in Nancy, G as in George, D as in David, Z as in zebra, O as in Oliver. Namsay
Oh.
Bangso.
Okay.
And the word Bangso, it means treasure house. And
Oh.
Namsay refers to Dzambala, the bodhisattva of wealth. And so Khenpo Rinpoche was asked to name the bookstore, and so he named it Namsay's Treasure House. It's very cute. Other questions that people might have? Yes.
I am still on uncertain ground when for just a very simple, maybe it's not possible to have a simple definition of the word Mahamudra and the word Dzogchen. I got myself relaxed with the notion that Mahamudra is the sum total teachings of the Kagyu school of Buddhism, and Dzogchen is the sum total teachings of the Nyingma school of Buddhism. How far off am I?
Yeah, you're not far off at all. In fact, in verse number 19 in the aspiration prayer of Mahamudra, he talks about Mahamudra, Madhyamaka, and Dzogchen. And what he basically does is he summarizes their view in just a few words. Free from mental fabrication. This is verse 19. Free from mental fabrication, it is Mahamudra. Free from extremes, it is great Madhyamaka. This is also called the great perfection, or Dzogchen, the consummation of all. May we have the confidence that understanding one realizes all. And so then he goes on to talk a little bit about these three. And I think you're not too far off, because it seems to me your definition is not too far off, because the highest meditation teaching of the Kagyu tradition that came from Tilopa, the Indian master, his student Naropa, his Tibetan student Marpa, Marpa's Tibetan student Milarepa, Milarepa's Tibetan student Gampopa, and Gampopa's student Dusum Kempa, the first Karmapa. This lineage of great masters, the teaching that they passed down from generation to generation, it's Mahamudra, and that is the highest meditation practice of this tradition. That's what they taught, and they taught it in all kinds of ways. They taught Sutra Mahamudra, they taught Tantra Mahamudra, they taught Essence Mahamudra, they taught all forms of Mahamudra as the practice that brought these masters to enlightenment. And so in the Dzogchen tradition of the Nyingma, that highest meditation practice that they do is called Dzogchen, or the great perfection. And there are so many ways that it is taught. It's taught through so many different practices. And so that's their way of talking about it. And then the great middle way, which is called the Madhyamaka, I don't know as much about it, but I do see that it is taught widely in the Gelug and the Sakya schools as being the highest method of understanding wisdom and reality. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
start. It's a start. So you're not far off. But the
Thank-
good news in verse number 19, the good news is we don't have to study all three of them. Because in that last line, it says, may we have the confidence that understanding one realizes all. So now we don't have to, we don't have to try to study all three of them. We just have to study one of them really well. And because we've been introduced to Mahamudra, we've got a head start. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sometimes, it just, the inability of letting go the confusion of saying, it's okay, I'm confused, so big deal, let's go on. And also past training of, okay, is this part of classics or Renaissance or,
I hear that.
kind of feeling the comfort of organization in the mind.
I understand that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why, and this is part of the reason why I talked about Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and his simplified curriculum for his American students. Shamatha, okay, you learn Shamatha, you learn Chenrezig, you learn Tonglen, you learn Nundro, then you learn, Karmapakshi and Mahamudra. And it's very simplified, and it takes a person from one to another, and you don't have to like stress, it's that helped me.
Actually, yes, it does. For some reason, the organization gives me comfort. It kind of gives me maybe the false notion of security. I know where I stand. I know, I know what's happening.
I know. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And thank you for that. I mean, it's like, I love being a human being because I'm a little confused all the time. And I know I would like to be unconfused. some of the time. So, and having been, you know this feeling. You've met these great masters, and even though, we've met these great masters, we're not them, and that's okay. We are us, and we receive their blessing, and we have been given teachings to do, practices to do, and that's really helped us. If I look back at where I was before I started Buddhism, before Buddhism, I feel like I'm in a better place now, even though I'm still human and still confused. I have things to hold on to that I know are worthwhile. I know they're worthwhile.
And for me, the almost a miracle of meeting Taisiru Rinpoche, the Karmapa, the Dalai Lama, and then the many other high lamas, Sogya Rinpoche, Mingyur Rinpoche. Wow,
I know how'd that happen, right?
Me.
Yeah. It's so, because it's like, what kind of karma did we have? I look at, some of us, a couple of us have some gray hair. I get that. And, yeah, there we go. And, and yeah, I know. See, everybody's going through it. So it's like a human thing. But, those of us who did get to meet these masters, we were just incredibly lucky. And here's a piece of really good news. Situ Rinpoche told a group of us who had gathered to receive teachings from him. He said, the good news about this life, he said, is that you get to keep everything you learned. You don't lose any of it. And he said, you build on it in your next life. So he said, you don't have to worry about like, will I meet the Dharma in my next life? He says, no worries. He says, you will meet it, and so forth and so on, unless you have other karma that gets in the way. And so he said, you get to keep everything you learned. You get to, you get to, I'll never forget. He said, all of the progress you have made in this life, you get to keep. You get to keep it. And so that was really good. And then Mcarthur Rinpoche said, and just in case, he said, pray to be reborn in Dewa Chen. And he says, and when you arise in Dewa Chen, you'll be a first level bodhisattva, because you'll see Amitabha Buddha, and you'll become a first level bodhisattva right there on the spot. And then you can go and emanate anywhere to get all the teachings you missed. That just tickled me. The whole idea, being reborn in Dewa Chen, being able to
I
pick
like
up
that.
on. That good?
Yeah,
That's
that's
really
really good. But
Really
can
good.
I read somewhere that you can choose. Oh, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Okay. All of a sudden my phone just lost you. I read somewhere that some people can choose whether they want to be reborn or not. Have you ever heard that?
I don't know much about that. I am not familiar with that. But until a person has reached, my understanding is that until a person has reached the first level of bodhisattva awakening, their karma is in charge of where they are reborn and when, and the whole thing. And so your karma blows you like a leaf in the wind, is what I heard in one teaching. And so until we reach the first level of bodhisattva awakening, we have no choice whatsoever. After that, apparently there is a choice, but I don't know much about it. I have never been there, so I don't know. So,
Yeah.
okay,
I think maybe that's where I read it, where it was connected only with people that are already a bodhisattva. If they would come back again, would they still, their choice would be only if they could then help other people to then reach that level. Would they want to come back, I guess, was what I think, something like I read. I don't know.
I can't say with certainty,
Yeah.
but my understanding is that when a person has achieved the first level of bodhisattva awakening, they are only interested in benefiting other beings. That's all they want to do, is benefit beings. So hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah, I listened to a talk that the Dalai Lama gave just recently, and he just kept saying that that was his only reason of
Yeah.
wanting to be here.
Yeah, just benefit beings, because when you reach that, you can benefit them just by being thought of. I mean, it's amazing. Now I see, because of time, we're running over time just a little bit, but if you guys are okay, staying for another 5 or 10 minutes, are you okay with that? Yeah, okay, okay. I wanted to, there is a question or a comment that was put in a private message that I'm now going to put on a message for everyone, because it's a question. It says, during our recent aspiration teachings, did you say that in the Chenrezig or other deity practice, did you say we touch upon or experience Mahamudra, however briefly? And I'm glad you asked about this, because when I was teaching a text to a group of folks at the Wichita KTC earlier this year, a lot of people were discouraged because the view of Mahamudra, as you can see from this book, the view of Mahamudra is a little bit complicated. And, and some folks who feel a little bit intimidated by how complex the view is. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, and so on. It's a little bit overwhelming. And so what I said to that group, and I'll say this to you too, is that Mahamudra doesn't have to be intellectually understood to be experienced. And I think that's very important. And so I said, for example, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche explained to us that when we do simple deity practices for example, Chenrezig, when we do Chenrezig practice, when we are visualizing ourselves as Chenrezig, how do we do that? We visualize ourselves as being empty of solidity and made of light. Empty and made of light. That's how we see our form as Chenrezig's form, empty and made of light. And he called this concordant Mahamudra. And I went up to, after he explained this, I'm going to put this in the chat. Concordant, and I can't spell. And yeah. This idea of visualizing oneself as a Buddha made of light and empty inside. He said, he called it concordant Mahamudra. And this is, I said, well, does that mean it's not Mahamudra? And he said, it's very, very similar. And I mean, even His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, when he gave the Chenrezig empowerment at KTD in 2006, he said, Mahamudra is not easy to understand. That's what he said. He said, it's not easy. He said, if you were to tell a person, meditate on the nature of your mind as emptiness and luminosity, he said, they may not have any idea of what you mean. They may not understand what you're trying to say. But if you say, visualize yourself as Chenrezig made of light and empty inside, he said, that's something they can wrap their intellect around. They can actually imagine that. And he said, so he called this visualization meditation, he called it symbolic Mahamudra. So whether you call it symbolic Mahamudra or concordant Mahamudra, it is similar to the way of thinking about the mind as being empty and luminous. And then the Dalai Lama said, and what do you do at the end of the Chenrezig practice? He said, you dissolve everything into utter emptiness and rest there briefly. And he said, this is genuine meditation on Mahamudra. He says it's very brief, but it's genuine. And so this means that for those of us who do Chenrezig practice, we have this moment that we can show up for and be present for at the end of the practice. And it's exactly the same in the Nundro practice, because at the end of every session of Nundro practice, what do? You dissolve the guru into yourself and you rest in the confidence that your mind and the guru's mind have merged inseparably. It's another form of Mahamudra. And so going back to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche calling Chenrezig practice, where you visualize yourself as Chenrezig made of light and empty inside, he called it concordant Mahamudra. He said, if you do this, I asked him about the concordant part. I said, does that mean it's not really Mahamudra? And he said, that depends. He said, if you do this with great sincerity and great attention and sincerity, he said, at some point, it will cross over and become Mahamudra. He says it starts out just being similar to the Mahamudra, but he says if you do it well and you do it continuously, he says at some point it will cross over and become Mahamudra. And I was totally encouraged by that, totally encouraged. So I think that those of us who are doing Chenrezig as our main practice and think, oh, well, I'll never get to do Mahamudra because I'm doing Chenrezig. But the fact of the matter is, if you read the 15th Karmapa's commentary on, if you read the 15th Karmapa's commentary on Chenrezig, he gives a Mahamudra instruction in the section where he teaches how to meditate while you're reciting the mantra. Form as deity, sound as mantra, thought as awareness. So he gives a way of holding your mind on the visualization so that it is concordant Mahamudra. And what Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said is, if you do that practice with great sincerity, one of these days it'll cross the line, and he says, you'll know it when it happens. So. Okay, time for one more. Is there one more out there? Yeah, I'm really glad for your questions. These have been excellent.
I have one, I don't know if it's a comment,
Yes.
comment or a question, but
Sure.
in this morning when I was sitting and then I was reading verse 15, resting the mind and unfabricated, innate spontaneity. So anyway, resting the mind, unfabricated. It just strikes me how it's the really essential part of Mahamudra practice is to rest your mind, and how it's just the last thing your mind wants to do. How, as you said a little while ago, you know, it rests for a second and then your mind wants to take off onto the next thing. So I suppose you just say it's the habit pattern of the mind. But it's sort of amazing, you know, as you sit more, kind of amazing to watch how, you know, just those little moments where it rests. It's like, okay, that's, of course, if you think, yeah, now I'm getting somewhere, that's another problem.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the idea is to return always, just always return, you know, because I'm looking at I mean, there's several different, there's one that I'm oh, here it is. It's number 17. Looking again and again at the mind that cannot be looked at. One sees clearly just as it is the truth of not seeing. Resolving any doubts as to how it is or is not, may we recognize our unconfused nature by ourselves. So the idea is that we just, once we learn how to rest, the suggestion is that we return to rest over and over and over again. And I think that that this is something that we need to learn gradually. You know, we need to learn gradually and to have a guidance from teachers, you know, so that we don't make a mistake with that. But So for most people, I think the best way to do that is to do practices like Chenrezig and just be present. Just be present for the rest. Don't try to make it last. Don't try to make it become something else. Just allow the mind to rest. And Khenpo Rinpoche actually said once, he said, when you're in the middle of your day and, you have finished one task, but you haven't taken up the next task yet. He said, you just let your mind, the translator literally used the slang term flop. Let your mind just flop, like you're flopping in your easy chair at the end of a busy day. Boop. Just let your mind fall and rest. And then he said, nobody's going to know what you're doing. He said, they're just going to think you're being thoughtful for a moment. And then after that, when your thoughts begin again, he said, because what's going to happen when you do that is that your mind will be quiet for just a moment. And then after that, thoughts will return. But that's okay because you did it. And I think that this is what they're getting at in verse number 17. If you look at the, I'm looking for it here. See. Okay, waves of subtle and gross. I'm looking for the, oh, here it is. My favorite translation is the one that is in the Kagyu Munlam prayer book. So for verse 17, my favorite version of it is this. When looking again and again at the mind, which has nothing to look at, nothing to see is vividly seen as it is. I just love the sort of frankness of that. When looking again and again at the mind, which has nothing to look at, nothing to see is vividly seen as it is. He said that is the resolution of doubts about what it is and is not. Without delusion, may we recognize our own nature. So the idea is that just experiencing it over and over and over again, we will gradually, drop by drop, moment by moment, we will gain certainty that this is how mind is. And when we gain that certainty, then that's what he means. May we recognize our unconfused nature by ourselves. Khenpo Rinpoche said, everybody talks about the pointing out instruction like it's really great. And he said, yes, it really is great. He said, but it's almost better to approach it gradually, gradually bit by bit in this way. Excuse me. In order to approach it gradually, he said, so that you are more familiar with your own mind. And so you do it yourself. Then he said, then nobody's gonna, he says, you won't need somebody to tell you anything, which it's like, he said, you do it for yourself, then, nobody has to convince you. It's because this is one of the meanings in my mind. In my mind, this is one of the meanings of Mahamudra, because mudra means seal in this case, like the seal of authenticity on document, right? So you could call it the great authenticity. And the great authenticity is just how mind is. So now I'm going to sneeze again. It's anyway, allergy season. But thank you very much for that comment. I really appreciate it.
We should make the last question, Lama Kathy, now.
Okay, yes, that's the last question. Oh, I see the time. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
So it's been fantastic. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for your questions. They're fantastic. And I have had so much fun talking with you about these things and being able to share what Khenpo Rinpoche said. And it's my hope that this will allow you to see that doing Chenrezig practice is Mahamudra, doing, there's lots of things. Doing Tonglen can be Mahamudra if you rest at the end and just let go of the visualization and let the mind rest at the end of Tonglen. So you don't have to like understand something deep. You just need to meditate and just keep practicing. So it's my hope that that you are able to continue your curriculum of practice and continue to help each other in the practice. So let's dedicate some merit. We gather together all of the merit from the whole class, as well as all of the merit from the past and all the merit that will come in the future, and dedicate it to the liberation of all beings. I'll recite this short prayer in English. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
Lama.
much.
Thank you.